discussion is gonna be first about understanding what theory is and what practice is, talking about the advantages and disadvantages of both, and then we're gonna talk about our own opinion on the type of balance that should exist between the two, and that will be it. So, without further ado, we're gonna move on to our first point. What is theory and practice? Daniel, would you like to say something about that?
Well, well, theory is it's in architecture. See, because the thing is that there are two ways of looking at it. Context matters. Because if you're in school, theory would have to be like what particular theories that you you'd use as a lens through which you conduct your designs and all of that. But in this case, we're looking at theories in the sense of your not ideologies, but like your hey, fuck this.
Could you
You're
say
not static.
that's okay? It's all right. It happens to all of us. So, would you say I'm gonna pause to allow you?
All right.
All right, then. What's your understanding of theory and practice in architecture?
All right. In this context, theories we look at theories as an approach to design in the sense of um, how do you go about designing what you're designing, the principles, the steps you take in going about your design. So it's kind of broad, but it's also a bit specific to from one person to another. So essentially, we're talking about if we're looking at, if you're asking me personally, it's how do I perceive approach to design and practice? How do we balance it? How do you how do you make it work? So basically, that's what we're talking about today.
All right. And from my perspective, I'll say theory is um, all that help you design, all the thinking behind your design, whether there are principles, ideologies, whatever that they can be, those will be your theories. And practice for me will be the implementation or concretization of the actual thinking that you had in this architecture or design. I would like us to talk a little bit about the benefits of each of these elements, aspects rather, the theoretical aspect and the practical aspect in architecture. Tell me a little bit about the advantages of each one.
Um, so as I said earlier, the theory would be like an approach. So say you want to design a mall. What are the steps you take? What do you consider? How do you transition from the idea that's in your mind to actually putting down feasible plans, feasible ideas, drawings, and all of that to come up with the final product? Because you don't just conjure up designs from thin air. A good design follows stages. You go from the inception, which is the idea, what's going on, what do you want to do. You move towards the research. So okay, fine, I want to design a mall. What comes into it? What do I need to include? then you start thinking, okay, this is what I need to put in the number of malls, this anchor store, this and that. Fine, I have my brief. How then do I go about designing this? Because you just don't want to throw rooms here, throw this retail store here, throw this. It has to be a thought process towards it. So and that's where the theories come in. So the theories
That would be
enable you.
how a theory can be helpful to
Mhm.
us. So that's how a theory
Yeah, so the theories,
us.
the, the theories help you streamline your thoughts. Because, and I'm sure you understand this, when you're designing or when you have a design project, in your head, it is everywhere, it's scattered. You have this here, you have that there, you have this and all of that going on.
Yes.
But you need a single thread. You need a focus.
Yeah.
So your theories give you that focus. It gives you a lens through
Definitely.
which your designs can be achieved. And that's what gives an understandable project, an understandable design that you see and you know, okay, yes, this is exactly what this person was trying to achieve. This person was trying to achieve this and it got it. And theories enable you to do that.
Yeah, definitely. All right. And
What's your
talk
take
a
on it?
little bit more about the practical aspect of design.
Oh
How
yeah, the practical aspect of design is like,
is
when a client comes to you and tells you, I want them more, that client is not interested in the steps you take to get that more. That client isn't interested in your approach, is not interested in your ideologies, is not interested. Actually, the client knows nothing about that. Really knows nothing about that, which is fine.
generally,
But but at the end of the day, the client wants is more,
yeah.
right? And that's your practice, that's your focus, that's the input.
Mm.
So theories help you achieve that. Achieve the theories you use, the approach, the principles you employ to go about your design gives you that final result, which is essentially what that client wants, the final product, that more. But then again, the the practice is money based. The practice, you essentially start a practice to make money. Architecture is a business. Architecture, at the end of the day, is a business. So your first priority should be the profit, right? And that's actually achieving the more. Now, the balance. See, because now we're talking about the balance between the theory and the practice, and the reason for that is because many times we as architects, particular theories,
Dan, are you still there? There's a little bit of a connection problem. I'm just gonna pause for now and we'll try to sort out this technical issue.
so now you're going to
What are the advantages of theory and the advantages of the practice in architecture? Can you hear me? Dan, you're
mhm.
frozen. Can you hear me? Dan, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hmm?
I can hear you now.
Okay, good. So the advantages of theory is that,
I can hear you.
yes, good. I'm talking now. The advantages of the theoretical part uh, is that it gives you some base on which you can construct, as you said, um, something that helps you to design properly. So it's sort of a base without which your actual construction process can be done in a way that is not relevant to um, what the brief requires. But because the theory, whatever theory you decide to choose, will have to be relevant to what the client has asked you to do. Which is why a little bit later
Mm.
we'll talk about how you can start balancing theory and practice, the connection between the two, because there has to be that sort of connection
Mm.
for your theory to be meaningful. And the practical aspect of design, of course, it's inevitable because we live in a physical world. Everything is expressed through materiality. So you need to implement whatever ideas that you had in mind, whatever ideas that you've developed in order to meet the design brief that the
Mm.
um, has helped you construct it. The practice will then be the actual manifestation, of how you've solved the problems that the uh, clients would have brought up to you. So we can also talk a little bit now about um, how, when we look at those two aspects in some sort of isolation, they bring some sort a certain disadvantage to the whole industry. So I'll start talking first about the theoretical aspect. When it is isolated from the practical aspect, what we sometimes unfortunately do, or I would say mostly professors do, is that they can have
Let them catch you.
a lot of philosophy or ideas that they've developed, which came from somewhere, from the observation of a certain maybe neglected area, but they look at them in a very isolated way. It's mostly discussed within the academic realm without uh, assessing in real
The
life.
practicability of it, or the
Exactly.
feasibility of it.
And its relevance as well, especially when it
Mm.
is a social building, for instance, right? You want to talk about the economic aspect, you want to talk about the connection, whether from a social, which could be related to the culture of the place, or from the geographical, context. When you don't look at how actually those things are in real life, but you just talk about them from a very remote place, you come up with theories which tend to be very detached from reality. And that could be,
Very abstract.
yes, a very disadvantage.
Let your professors catch you.
And on the other hand, that was on one hand. On the other hand, when you talk about
Mm.
practice without theory, there is the danger of doing things just because it has been done that way all the time throughout history,
Mm.
without understanding the reason why things were done that way. But you need to understand the reason
Yeah.
the way things are in order to come up with fresh and innovative solution that will tackle all the issues that we face in the architectural and construction industry. So that would be my intake on that. If you like, you can
Mhm.
all comment on that. Otherwise, we can move on to our opinion
I
on how. I'm listening.
I just want to say that it is a symbiotic relationship. The the theories, the use of theories, and the practice, the actual practice, the end result, the aim, the um, the reason why you're doing what you're doing, the buildings that you design. It's a symbiotic relationship. It should be a symbiotic relationship. Um, and you can tell because oftentimes when you go out, especially as a practitioner, you've you've designed a few buildings, you've been in the game, and then you go out and then you see some buildings and you're like, mm, mm, and that's usually because it was done in an arbitrary way. It's just okay, let's do this, let's do this, let's do this. Because as soon as you see a well thought of building, your instant reaction is like, yeah, no, this is good. And that alone tells you something. Because the eyes perceive a lot. The eyes perceive and then it sends the message to your brain and instantly you can tell what is going on. And that is when you know that, okay, yeah, this and this, meaning the theories, the use of theories and the actual designs that the firm does, you can tell that it is in tandem.
Yes.
And then, like you said, when you just use theories arbitrarily as well, it also doesn't work
Mm,
because there has to be a feasibility aspect to it. It's like
mm,
when you just see a building and you can tell that, okay, this person is trying to achieve this person is trying to achieve this, but it doesn't quite come out the way it's supposed to, meaning the functionality is off. And from my observation, that's what I've been able to see when you design specifically with theories without actually incorporating or testing the feasibility to it. Because for me, the function is not priority.
mm,
The building or the space you design has to function as it should
mm,
and not necessarily the aesthetics of it or whatnot. For me, the functionality is key. But then I've been able to observe that you have buildings with potential, but they don't work. You can see the architect is trying to achieve a certain maybe ambience or a certain um, uh, element, maybe inclusivity or whatnot, but it just doesn't work because he didn't consider or she didn't consider the practical aspect to it. So yes, it has, like you said, it's it follows one another. It should be in
mm.
tandem.
Yes. So you started talking about your opinion, or I would call it ideology, on uh, how to balance the two. So you said for you the um, priority would be on
Function.
functionality, right? And you start with the functionality, and everything follows that. And personally, I do understand the importance of the functionality. I generally start with the client. And someone told me once that what do you asked me the question to know who is actually the client, especially when you're dealing with some social project. Is it the person who pays for the project or the people who will be using the actual building? And they propose that the client should be the people who will be using the building. Why? Because
Mm-hmm.
the person who pays for it can pay for it and give you a bunch of recommendation requirements, which might not necessarily be what the ones who will be using the building want. So you need at a certain point to go to the grassroots level interact with people, know what's the issue or the challenges they're facing, and then from there,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where personally I like to start. And it is both a functional and theoretical process. I'll explain how. Functional because it is feasible, it's practical. Once you've consulted the people who are involved, who are concerned, you know that the the, the chances of the building being successful is really high because they will see
Mm.
something to relate to. And it's also theoretical because you then start engaging with some thinking, new thinking that you were not aware about, new ways of living that you were not aware about, which you need to knit into the implementation of the building. So there is some sort of theorizing, from whether it is a cultural perspective or geographic perspective, climatic perspective to the implementation of the building. So that's for me the theorizing. I mean, a more successful theorization. So taking what is already existing, understanding the challenges and problems, and then from there derive a certain uh, or look um, how can I put it? I would say come up with a certain a scientist do hypothesis. So you
All
propose
right.
something and say, if I'm right, all right, by doing one, two, three, I should be able to meet the needs of the clients, which are the users. So I will start with the client. I will then try to understand the reason uh, why they talk about a certain element, and then try to see how I can translate that into architectural terms, and that's where the practice comes in.
Um, I agree with that. I agree with that. But you mentioned something.
Mhm.
Um, See, that point is a good point. Who actually is the client? Um, and yes, your answer is right. The clients, the people that use it, those are the people that you should use, the people that would use the facility or the environment you're designing, which is true. But there's a flip side to it, in my opinion,
Mhm.
because yes, the people that you design that are actually going to use the space, say you design a mall, you don't design it. Not that you don't design it, you consider the people that will actually use it, the customers. How are they going to get into that store? Where is the anchor store? You need to be able to drive in traffic from the outside to the anchor store, and then you have your retail stores filtering, along the peripheral, so that as you're going to the anchor store, they are able to buy, or they see some of these retail stores and they just pop in and then pick one or two things outside you drive traffic. So basically, you design it for it's those guys that are there, but also you design it for the person paying, because it's a business. Architecture is a means to an end. It's a business that the client can't design on his own. He doesn't know how to do it. It's not his field. That's why he came to you, right? So now it is now up to you to use your discretion and your skill and your intellect to be able to balance the two. Because to me, good architecture involves a high level of diplomacy and creativity. Because oftentimes your client wants, the person paying wants a certain thing, but you'll find out that it doesn't make sense, or it's not practical, or it's just stupid. But you, as an architect, because you've been trained and you're skilled in that department, you should be able to sift out what exactly that client wants within the realm of the legal framework that is acceptable, your building standards and your codes and whatnot. But then also creatively adapt whatever he or she wants into something feasible and practical. It's for me that that is the the best way a practical practice, architectural practice, operating as a business can thrive. Um, you say you're designing something social, like a park. Say a philanthropist has commissioned the park. The person paying is the client. You're not designing for that person paying. You're designing for the people that would use that park. Now the client wants a an Afro themed park with this and that and all these things. But you know that ish people don't actually use parks like that. People would go, especially after you've done your reconnaissance, you've done your survey and all of that. You know that the best potential for this park, it's something subtle and quiet and just down to earth. It's up to you as the architect to be able to take whatever the client wants. If you're unable to convince the client that his idea is stupid, or for lack of a better word, I guess stupid, but I don't know. But it's up to you to be able to convince your client that,
Or maybe
all
just
right,
a little bit
what you what
less, to be less shocking, you could just say the idea is not relevant. Could be relevant in some
no,
other.
not relevant. Because the thing is, I used stupid because it's like when a client tells you he has a one plot of land, a small one plot of land, and he or she wants this mansion built on it. You get that many times. Oh, the land is small, but can I get like 7 rooms and 3 bathrooms and a
I get your point.
playground in the back? And you're like, bruh, yeah, that's my point. So sometimes it just doesn't make sense. So it's now up to you as the architect to be able to sift out what is relevant and practical in what that client wants and creatively achieve it within the framework. So for me, that's where I feel the architecture of it comes in. So then you then bring in your theories as to, okay, how am I going to achieve this? Now this person wants this, but it doesn't make so much sense. But I need to give it to him or I need to give it to her. So I'm going to use this, I'm going to take this approach. I'm going to take this approach to design. And I'm going to test it out. I'm going to test it against this, test it against that. But I'm going to take this approach to design. And for me, that approach most times is the functional approach because you functionality can be mixed with aesthetics. I believe that, but the functionality would come first because how you use a space and how you experience a space is more important, or not necessarily more important, but also has a link to the aesthetics of it. You might see a hut and the hut is looking like it's not something it's not looking aesthetically pleasing, so to speak. But then you go into that hut and it's just cool. It's nice. The feel of it is good. You're there, and then all of a sudden, oh, this place isn't so bad. I can chill here. It's nice. So the perception and the use of it, from my experience and my observation, the perception and the use of the space, the function of it, sometimes trumps the aesthetics. Now, successful architecture can then now merge the aesthetics with the function of it. Now, see if you're able to merge it, if you're able to work in such a way that the function and the aesthetics just go hand in hand, then you're there. It's right.
Understand.
But that takes a while to perfect. But that should be the ideal case. But for me, functionality
Mm.
trumps it,
All right.
or
And another
it
thing
goes
we
a
can
long way.
look at is the fact that architecture is an interdisciplinary field, and
Mm,
sometimes it lead us in because of that we have different types of projects. There are certain projects which becomes more artistic than functional, other projects we have which are
mm,
very functional than artistic, and by functional as well, we have different types of functionality. It can be the spatial functionality, or it can be just
mm,
uh, kind of feasibility in terms of the money, um, or it can be another type where you have the environment that comes first, and there are many aspects that can come. It can also be a project that is very structural engineering, and then that will probably take the priority, especially when you're dealing with mega structures like bridges and so on. So
mm.
maybe uh, being aware of that, we can now talk about how our ideologies can then become flexible and changes according to the different types of project. Would you like to start?
Um,
I can. Mm,
yeah, I can start. Like I said earlier, successful architects, successful architecture would merge the function and the aesthetics. Um, now I'll take it a step further because now we're talking about theories and approach. Now, if you say you have, if you're, if you try to, or if you attempt to create for yourself an approach to design, say you're trying to come up with something that you feel, nah, this approach works for me, right? It should be able to um, work in different typologies of buildings, a church, a mosque, a school, a more an office, whatever. You're trying to create a sort of specific sort of architectural approach, right? For me, that would be great, but it it would have to be it would have to be a kind of approach to design that transcends specificity in a sort of way. Um, if that sort of architecture, um, yeah, transcends specificity of typologies, but rather accesses, it cuts across all aspects of design in the sense that this approach, these steps that you're taking to achieve this can be modified, still the same thing, but can be modified to, um, say you use that for a church, you modify it, same thing, but you modify it for a school and it works. You modify it for an office, it works. Now that kind of, if you're able to create for yourself that kind of approach that is suitable to you, then I guess that would work for what you're talking about. Because oftentimes you don't get that. Oftentimes what you have more is almost like a trial and error kind of thing. And okay, um, yeah, let's try this. It doesn't work, now scrap it. Or you get a situation where, like you said in the beginning, different theories for different projects. So you're doing a social center, you start looking at social theories. How does this and how does you start factoring inclusivity? You want, you know, social theory. You want to design a yeah, a school. You're looking at a different theory. you want to design, you're looking at a different theory. Now, what what the architecture that you're referring to, or um the kind of architecture that I feel would be ideal. Now, I haven't created it yet, but it's just what I've explained. If it cuts across different typologies, if it's able to cut across different typologies, that's an architecture and it's perfect.
Okay.
I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it was more of you commenting and explaining your approach than answering a question. Yes.
Because my approach,
mm.
if I'm to, like, off the top of my head, that particular approach.
Yeah, I feel like I've understood. You've explained that.
Okay, all right then, it's cool. I don't have to run my mouth again.
No, that's okay.
Yeah, I can keep short.
And
it'd be nice to keep short. Just keep short. The light on my face and shit.
Concisely, I would say that personally, I would look, in order to achieve what you talked about, I would start readjusting my priorities according to project. If I am dealing with an environmental project, my priority won't be the very same as when I am dealing with an artistic project or a social project. What I would have for an environmental project, I would look, I would have probably a very in-depth site analysis, climatical site analysis, environmental site analysis, and my theories, of course, will have to derive from that site analysis. And that same approach, right, within the, let's say, artistic project will be for me to look at the cultural analysis of the context within which I'm found, and then derive my theories from there, which will be then translated into architecture later. And the very same thing with the environmental project. And so I would like to thank you for your participation. Thank you for watching The Craft. This was The Craft with Anthony and Emmanuel. Please subscribe.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Fine. Play. In conclusion, we talked about our understanding of theory and practice in architecture. And then we talked about the advantages and disadvantage of both sides. And we talked about how different people balance the two sides and then come up with their own ideologies